This is not a debate, Zelona. Sign the goddamn paper and end this accident before it ruins my career. Vesperian roared, slamming his fist onto the mahogany dining table. The crystal glasses rattled, a sound as fragile as our marriage. I stared at him, my eyes burning with a cold, savage fire. An accident? You're calling the life inside me an accident while you're pouring $320,000 into a condo for that little parasite Nyx. Vesperian froze, his face turning a sickly shade of purple. Before he could speak, Obsidiana chimed in from the head of the table, her voice like sandpaper on silk. Don't be hysterical, dear. At 35, you're practically an antique. You should thank Vesperian for even considering keeping you around. Now, sign the abortion consent. We have a reputation in Savannah to uphold. I felt the blood boil in my veins, a volcanic heat that finally erupted. I grabbed the heavy crystal water pitcher and slammed it onto the table, shattering it. Water and glass shards flew everywhere. Reputation? I screamed, stepping toward Obsidiana until I was inches from her wrinkled, arrogant face. You want to talk about reputation, you thieving old viper? I know about the $450,000 you siphoned from the estate. I know you forged the signatures. You don't have a reputation, you have a rap sheet. You bitch! Obsidiana gasped, clutching her pearls. Vesperian, do something! Vesperian lunged for my arm, his fingers digging into my skin like talons. You've been spying on us? In my house? I shoved him back with a strength that shocked him, my teeth bared. Your house? This floor you're standing on? I paid the back taxes. Those shoes on your feet? I bought them. You're nothing but a hollow suit filled with lies and cheap scotch. I am the lead architect of the waterfront project, he bellowed, trying to regain his dominance. I am the power in this city. You're a thief, Vesperian. I countered, my voice echoing through the vaulted ceiling. I found the original blueprints you stole from that intern. I have the timestamps. I have the emails. You didn't build Savannah. You plundered it. Zelona, listen to me. His tone shifted to a desperate, oily plea. No, you listen. I grabbed the sonogram from the sideboard and held it up like a weapon. This child will never know you. I will erase you from my history like a bad footnote. You want me to sign something? Here. I picked up the fountain pen from the table, but instead of the legal papers, I scrawled one word in giant, jagged letters across the white linen tablecloth. War. What is this? Obsidiana shrieked, looking at the ink-stained cloth. It's your eviction notice. I spat. Vesperian, your firm's board of directors just received an anonymous tip about your borrowed designs, and Obsidiana, the bank's fraud department, is reviewing your inheritance as we speak. You thought I was just a quiet history teacher? You forgot that historians are experts at uncovering the dirt. Vesperian's hand trembled as he reached for his phone. I'll destroy you. I'll make sure you never work in this state again. Try it, I challenged, leaning over the table, my eyes locked onto his. I have enough evidence to bury you both in a cell so small, you'll have to take turns breathing. Now, get out of my sight before I decide to call the police right now and report the theft of the jewelry you took from my safe last night. You wouldn't, Vesperian whispered, his bravado crumbling. I'm done being the victim of your mediocrity, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly calm whisper. Get out, both of you, before I stop using words and start using the fireplace poker. I watched them, the architect of lies and the queen of fraud, scramble out of the room like rats fleeing a sinking ship. My heart was pounding, my breathing heavy, but for the first time in 13 years. I didn't feel like a wife. I felt like an executioner. The front door slammed with a force that rattled the antique sconces in the hallway. I stood in the middle of the wreckage, spilled tea, shattered glass, and a tablecloth stained with the ink of my declaration. My chest heaved, every nerve in my body humming with a dark, electric energy. I wasn't crying. I was calculating. My phone chimed. A message from Zenobia, my attorney, and the only person in the city who knew where my bodies were buried. The detonator is set, Z. The board meeting for the waterfront project starts in 20 minutes. Are you sure about this? There's no turning back. I typed back with steady fingers. Burn it all down. I grabbed my coat and headed for the garage. I didn't need much. Just the hard drive tucked inside my false-bottomed briefcase and the sheer, unadulterated spite keeping my blood warm. As I backed my SUV out, I saw Vesperian's silver Porsche screeching away at the end of the driveway. He was headed to the office to save his career. He was already too late. 20 minutes later, I pulled up across the street from the glass and steel monolith that housed Vesperian and Associates. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. I sat in my car, adjusted the air conditioning to combat the suffocating Georgia humidity, and watched the chaos unfold through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the third-floor boardroom. I saw him enter. Even from here, I could recognize that arrogant stride. The way he adjusted his tie like he was stepping onto a stage. He thought he was going to charm his way out of the anonymous tip I'd sent. Beside me, my tablet flickered to life. I had hacked the boardroom's internal camera months ago. It was surprisingly easy. Vesperian's password was literally his own name followed by 1, 2, 3. Gentlemen, please. Vesperian's voice came through my speakers, smooth as expensive bourbon. These allegations of design theft are preposterous. I've been working on the EcoSteel schematics for 18 months. Then explain the timestamp on these original CAD files, Vesperian. A voice boomed. The chairman, a man who hated scandals more than he hated taxes. They were created 3 years ago by an intern named Leo Vance. An intern you fired for incompetence the day after these files were saved. On the screen, Vesperian's face drained of color. He looked like he'd been slapped. There must be a misunderstanding. Leo was working under my direct supervision. Enough, the chairman shouted. And what about this? An audit report showing $320,000 missing from the firm's discretionary fund. It seems it was used to purchase a luxury condo in the Midtown district. Care to explain why the firm is paying for your mistress's bedroom, Vesperian? I leaned back in my seat, a cold, predatory smile touching my lips. Check me, you bastard, I whispered to the empty car. Suddenly, my passenger door opened. I gasped, reaching for the heavy magnet in the center console, but it was just Zenobia. She slid in, smelling of expensive cigarettes and justice. You missed the best part, she said, nodding toward the building. The police are already in the lobby, not for the theft, for the fraud. Obsidiana cracked. As soon as the bank froze in her accounts, she tried to flee to Florida. They picked her up at a gas station in Brunswick. She's currently blaming everything on her son to save her own skin. I felt a surge of adrenaline so sharp it was almost painful. She sold him out? That quickly? Snakes eat their young when the fire gets too hot, Salona, Zenobia replied, looking at me with a mixture of awe and fear. You really did it. You stripped them naked in under an hour. Not yet, I said, my eyes fixed on the building's exit. I want to see him fall. I want to see the look in his eyes when he realizes he has nothing left. No house, no job, no mother, and no heir. 5 minutes later, the glass doors swung open. Vesperian was being led out in handcuffs, flanked by 2 detectives. His suit was rumpled, his hair a mess, and his face was a mask of pure, unbridled rage. He scanned the street, his eyes landing on my SUV. I rolled down the window. The silence between us was a chasm filled with 13 years of wasted life. He lunged toward the car, the officers straining to hold him back. "I'll kill you, Zylona," he screamed, his voice cracking. "I'll rot in hell before I let you take a cent of my money." "You don't have any money, Vesperian," I shouted back, my voice projecting with the authority of a woman who had finally found her soul. "And as for hell, look around. You're already there. I'm just the one who turned up the heat." I shifted into gear and floored the accelerator, leaving him screaming in a cloud of exhaust. I had $92,000 in my private account, a legal team that could dismantle a mountain, and a future that didn't include his name. "Where to now?" Zenobia asked. "To the hospital," I said, my hand resting protectively over my stomach. I need to make sure this baby knows its mother is a lioness, not a victim. But as we turned the corner, my phone buzzed again, an unknown number. "You think handcuffs can hold a man like my son? You forgot about the safe deposit box in Savannah Bank, Zylona. The one with your name on the forged documents. If he goes down, you're coming with us." It was a text from Obsidiana. Even from a precinct cell, the old viper had one last bit of venom to spit. I slammed my palm against the steering wheel. The sting in my hand, nothing compared to the white-hot fury radiating from my chest. "That miserable, prehistoric leech!" I hissed. Zenobia leaned over, her eyes narrowed as she read Obsidiana's text on my dashboard. "A safe deposit box at Savannah Bank? Zylona, if she's planted forged documents with your signature, this isn't just a divorce anymore. This is a setup for a felony. She's trying to trade your freedom for her son's." "She's not just bluffing," I snapped, shifting the SUV into gear. "She's been planning this exit strategy since the day I walked into their house. A woman like that doesn't care about burning the world down, as long as you're the one trapped in the basement." The Savannah Bank and Trust was a cold, judgmental monolith of marble. As I strode through the lobby, my heels clicking like gunfire. I didn't look like a victim. I looked like an executioner. "Box 402, now," I told the teller. My voice was a low vibration of authority that left no room for pleas. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Vesperian, but that box is..." "My husband is in a precinct cell, and his mother is being processed for fraud," I interrupted, leaning over the counter until the teller flinched. "Unless you want the police tape across your front doors, you will take me to that vault." Minutes later, in the claustrophobic silence of the private viewing room, I turned the key. The box slid out with a metallic screech. Inside wasn't gold. It was a thick manila envelope. I ripped it open and my breath hitched. Wire transfer receipts totaling $180,000. All moved from Vesperian's firm into a shell company. At the bottom of each page was my signature. A perfect, elegant forgery that made my skin crawl. She's been building a paper trail to make me the fall guy for Vesperian's embezzlement, I whispered, the rage turning into a cold, sharp stone in my gut. Suddenly, the heavy door creaked open. It wasn't a bank official. It was Nyx. She looked pathetic, her designer clothes rumpled, her eyes red from crying. "You're Zylona," she said, her voice shaking as she clutched a brass key. "Get out," I snarled. "I don't have time for the mistress's epiphany." "I have the key to the other box," Nyx shouted. "Vesperian gave it to me for safekeeping." He told me it was his life insurance. But they changed the locks on my $320,000 condo an hour ago. He threw me to the wolves, Zelona. I have the real ledger, the one that proves Obsidiana was the mastermind. I looked at the girl, this child who had slept in my bed, and felt nothing but cold calculation. I held out my hand. Give me the key, and if the ledger clears my name, I'll give you a 1-hour head start before I turn this over to the DA. Nyx dropped the key into my palm, as if it were burning her, and bolted. I opened box 505. Inside was a leather-bound book. I flipped to the last page, and my blood turned to ice. A payment of $50,000 to a private fixer, dated 2 days ago. The memo line read, "Final solution. X." They weren't just trying to jail me, Zenobia, I whispered, the ledger shaking in my hands. They were planning to kill me. The war wasn't about money anymore. It was about survival. The police precinct smelled of burnt coffee and desperation. I sat in the observation room, watching through the one-way glass as Obsidiana sat in the interrogation chair. Even in a holding cell, she held her head high, her spine as rigid as a graveyard fence. But she was sweating. The $450,000 fraud I had uncovered was a weight she couldn't shrug off. "She won't talk," Zenobia whispered beside me. "She's waiting for her lawyers to buy her way out." "She's not waiting for lawyers," I said, my voice cold and serrated. "She's waiting for the final solution to finish me off so I can't testify. Let me in there." "Zelona, that's highly irregular. I don't care about regular," I snapped, turning to the lead detective. "I have the ledger. I have the proof of the $50,000 hit she put on my life. Let me show her that her assassin failed, and she'll crumble like dry ash." The detective hesitated, then nodded. I pushed open the heavy steel door. The screech of the hinges made Obsidiana look up. For a split second, her eyes widened, a flash of genuine terror, before the mask of arrogance slammed back into place. "Zelona," she sneered, her voice trembling slightly. "Come to gloat? You're still a common teacher playing at being a queen. My son will have you crushed by morning." I didn't say a word. I walked slowly around the table, the heels of my boots echoing like a death knell. I placed the leather-bound ledger directly in front of her. I opened it to the last page, the one with the $50,000 payment to Vance Sterling. "Vance is gone, Obsidiana," I lied, leaning down until my face was inches from hers. I could smell her expensive, suffocating perfume. "He's already talking to the feds in the next room. He told them everything about the Savannah bank box, the forged transfers, and the final solution." Obsidiana's hands began to shake. She tried to hide them under the table, but I saw it. "You're lying." "Vance is a professional who values his life more than your money," I countered. I slammed my hand onto the table, making her jump. "Do you realize what you've done? You didn't just try to kill me. You tried to kill your own grandchild, Vesperian's heir." That thing is a mistake," she shrieked, her composure finally snapping. "You were supposed to be a temporary convenience. You weren't supposed to own our legacy. Your legacy is a pile of stolen cash in a prison cell," I roared back, my voice vibrating with 13 years of suppressed rage. "I have the $180,000 forged receipts. I have the $320,000 condo records. I have everything. And right now, the only thing between you and a life sentence is me. Tell me where Vesperian is hiding the rest of the offshore accounts, or I will make sure you die behind bars. Obsidiana looked at me, her eyes darting like a trapped animal. Vesperian. He has the codes. In the study at Moss Haven. Behind the portrait of his father, $700,000 in crypto and offshore bonds. She slumped forward, the viper finally drained of its venom. Just tell the DA I cooperated. I stood up, closing the ledger with a definitive thud. I'll tell the DA exactly what you deserve, Obsidiana. Nothing. I walked out of the room without looking back. As the door clicked shut, I felt a sharp kick in my stomach. A reminder. Did you get it? Zenobia asked, coming forward. The study at Moss Haven, I said, grabbing my keys. The portrait. There's nearly 1 million more hidden there. But we have to move. If Obsidiana's assassin is still out there, he's headed for the house to clean up the evidence. And me. The hunt wasn't over. It had just moved to my own front door. The humidity of the Georgia night clung to my skin like a wet shroud. As I stood on the balcony of a motel room, Zenobia had booked under a fake name. In my hand, I swirled a glass of iced water, my eyes fixed on the flickering neon sign across the street. My heart was no longer racing with fear. It had settled into a rhythmic, predatory thrum. I was 35, pregnant, and currently being hunted by a man who didn't exist on paper. The fixer has a name, Zenobia said, stepping out of the shadows. She held a tablet showing a grainy surveillance photo of a man with a jagged scar and eyes as hollow as a grave. Vance the Ghost Sterling, ex-military. Obsidiana didn't just hire a thug, she hired a professional to erase you. I looked at the man who was currently stalking my life. He thinks he's hunting a panicked housewife. I said, my voice as hard as the obsidian my mother-in-law was named after. He doesn't realize he's hunting a woman with $92,000 in liquid cash and a burning desire for justice. I'm going back to the estate, Zenobia. Are you insane? That's the first place he'll look for you. Exactly. I smiled, a cold, jagged expression. Vesperian's smart home system is a $45,000 fortress of cameras and automated locks. He thought it was a toy to show off. I'm going to turn it into a cage. If Sterling wants me, he's going to have to walk into my museum of his own demise. I arrived at Moss Haven at 2 a.m. The massive oak trees looked like skeletons reaching for the sky. I didn't use the front door. I entered through the cellar, moving with the silence of a ghost. I sat in the darkened library, the blue glow of my laptop the only light. I had full access to the house's mainframe. Then, a flicker of movement near the rose bushes. Sterling was good, bypassing the laser tripwires, but I had recalibrated them to alert my phone instead of sounding an alarm. Come into my parlor, Vance, I whispered, my finger hovering over the enter key. As soon as his boots hit the hardwood floor of the foyer, I struck. With a single keystroke, the heavy steel hurricane shutters slammed down over every window and door. The sound was like a series of gunshots echoing through the empty halls. Who's there? Sterling's voice barked, sharp and panicked. I heard the distinct click of a safety being disengaged. I picked up the intercom microphone. You're in the wrong house, Vance. This isn't a residence anymore. It's a tomb for your career. I'll find you, lady. This house isn't that big, he roared, kicking at the reinforced library door. I wouldn't exert yourself, I said calmly. The air conditioning system is centralized. I just dumped 2 gallons of industrial ammonia into the intake vents. In 60 seconds, your lungs will feel like they're on fire. I watched the camera feed. Sterling began to cough, his movements becoming frantic as he collapsed to his knees. Wait! Stop! He wheezed. Obsidiana, she paid me $25,000 up front. I'll tell the cops everything. Just let me breathe. I don't want your money, I spat, watching him crumble. I want your confession. Speak clearly into the microphone. Tell me who hired you and what the final solution entailed. Do it, or I leave the vents open. Through the speakers came his ragged, desperate confession, detailing the meetings with Vesperian and the plan to stage my accidental drowning. I recorded every word. As the sirens began to wail in the distance, I walked out of the safe room and stood over the unconscious hitman. I pulled my $12,000 wedding ring off and dropped it onto his chest. Tell Vesperian I'm keeping the house, I said to the silence and the future. The morning sun over Savannah was filtered through a haze of gray clouds, mirroring the state of my life, gloomy, yet breaking into a sharp, cold clarity. I stood in the center of the master study at Moss Haven. The air was still thick with the chemical tang of ammonia, a lingering ghost of the trap I'd set for Sterling. The ghost was currently in a high-security ward, coughing up his lungs and signing away Vesperian's freedom to avoid a life sentence. The police have cleared the perimeter, Z, Zenobia said, walking into the room with 2 forensic accountants in tow. But the clock is ticking. Vesperian's lawyers are filing an emergency bail motion. We have exactly 4 hours before he might be back on the street. He won't have a street to walk on, I replied, my voice devoid of emotion. I turned to the portrait of Vesperian's father, a man who had built this dynasty on old money and even older secrets. I swung the heavy frame aside. Behind it sat a digital wall safe, sleek and mocking. The code, Zenobia prompted. Did Obsidiana give it to you? She gave me the hint, I said, my fingers hovering over the keypad. She said Vesperian was obsessed with his legacy, his masterpiece. I didn't type in his birthday. I didn't type in our anniversary. I typed in the square footage of the waterfront project. The heist he thought would make him a god. Click. The heavy steel door hissed open. Inside wasn't just cash. It was a cold, digital cold storage wallet and a stack of black ledgers. My God, one of the accountants whispered, peering over my shoulder. These aren't just offshore bonds. This is a double entry system for every major construction project in Savannah for the last decade. He wasn't just stealing from the firm. He was bribing city officials to bypass safety codes. I felt a sickening jolt of realization. The buildings Vesperian built were death traps. The $2 million waterfront project wasn't just a fraud. It was a disaster waiting to happen. This is the final solution, I whispered, the weight of the black book heavy in my hands. It wasn't just about killing me because I knew about his mistress. It was about killing me because I'm a historian. I was starting to look at the old blueprints of the 2018 stadium expansion. He knew I'd find the structural shortcuts. Suddenly, the house's intercom crackled. A voice, distorted and frantic, filled the room. Silona! I know you're in there! I froze. It was Vesperian. He wasn't supposed to be out. He posted a $500,000 cash bond, Zenobia hissed, checking her phone. How? All his accounts were frozen. Not the ones in the safe, I realized. He must have had a secondary access key I didn't find. I'm coming up, see? Vesperian's voice screamed through the speakers, sounding more like a wounded animal than a man. Give me the ledger, and maybe I'll let you leave this house alive. I've already lost the firm, the mistress, and my mother. I have nothing left to lose, and that makes me the most dangerous man you've ever met. I looked at the black ledger, then at the sonogram pinned to the corkboard on the wall. The rage I had been carrying, the hot volcanic fire, suddenly cooled into a diamond-hard resolve. Zenobia, get the accountants into the safe room, I commanded, my voice like ice. What about you? I'm going to meet the architect, I said, grabbing the fireplace poker. The very one I had threatened him with in Chapter 1. I want to show him exactly what happens when the foundation of his lies finally crumbles. I walked out to the grand staircase. Below in the foyer, Vesperian stood. He looked haggard, his expensive suit torn, a crazed light in his Atlantic storm eyes. He held a heavy construction hammer in one hand. "Where is it, Zylona?" He spat, starting up the stairs. "The book. Give it to me." "You built your life on sand, Vesperian," I said, standing at the top of the stairs, looking down at him. "And the tide is coming in." Vesperian took the first step up the grand staircase, his breathing ragged, the construction hammer swinging rhythmically at his side. The man who had once designed skyscrapers now looked like he was ready to demolish a soul. "You think you're a hero, Zylona?" he sneered, his voice echoing in the hollow foyer. "You're a thief. You stole my privacy, my mother's freedom, and my reputation. You've stripped me of everything. You stripped yourself, Vesperian!" I shouted back, my knuckles white as I gripped the fireplace poker. "I just turned on the lights so the world could see the rot. You gambled with people's lives. The stadium expansion, the waterfront project. How many lives were you willing to trade for a $320,000 condo and a mistress who didn't even know your middle name? People are sheep, Zai. They need someone to build the fences." He lunged up 3 steps, his eyes bloodshot. "Give me the ledger. It's my only leverage. If I go down, half the city council goes with me. I can still fix this." "The only thing you're fixing is a permanent residence in a federal penitentiary," I countered. I didn't wait for him to reach the landing. I moved with a sudden, violent grace. I swung the iron poker, catching the wooden banister with a deafening crack to keep him at bay. He swung the hammer, the heavy steel head missing my ribs by an inch and shattering the plaster of the wall behind me. "You're 35 and pregnant. You can't win this," he roared, swinging again. "I'm 35 and fed up," I barked. I used the length of the poker to jab at his chest, forcing him to stumble back down 2 steps. "And this baby? This baby is the only thing in this house that isn't a lie. I am fighting for a world where he doesn't have to carry the weight of your sins." Vesperian growled, a primal guttural sound, and threw his entire weight into a tackle. We crashed onto the landing. The poker clattered away, sliding across the polished hardwood. His hand clamped around my throat, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. "Where is the book?" He squeezed, his thumb pressing into my windpipe. I couldn't breathe. The world began to gray at the edges, but then I felt it. A sharp, rhythmic kick against my spine from the life inside me. A reminder of why I was here. I reached up, not for his face, but for the heavy crystal vase on the pedestal next to the landing. My fingers brushed the cold glass. I gripped the base and brought it down with every ounce of my remaining strength onto the side of Vesperian's head. The vase shattered. Blue hydrangeas and water exploded everywhere. Vesperian let go, gasping, clutching his temple as blood began to seep through his fingers. He rolled away, dazed, the hammer slipping from his grasp and tumbling down the stairs with a series of metallic thuds. I scrambled back, gasping for air, my throat burning. I grabbed the poker and stood over him, my chest heaving. I looked down at the man I had once loved, now just a broken architect sitting in a puddle of spilled water and broken glass. It's over, Vesperian, I wheezed, my voice raspy. Zenobia has already uploaded the digital contents of that safe to a secure cloud server. The police are 5 minutes away. Even if you kill me, the truth is already out. He looked up at me, the crazed light in his eyes dying out, replaced by a hollow, terrifying emptiness. You really did it, he whispered, his voice trembling. You burned the house down. No, I said, wiping a smear of blood from my cheek. I just cleared the land. Now I'm going to build something real. The distant wail of sirens began to crest over the hill of the driveway. Vesperian slumped against the banister, defeated by the very foundation he thought he owned. I walked past him, descending the stairs into the light of the flashing red and blue beams reflecting off the foyer walls. I was battered. I was bruised. But as I stepped through the front door, I realized I was finally home. The courtroom was a cathedral of cold oak and suffocating tradition. 6 months had passed since the night at Moss Haven, and the humid Georgia summer had given way to a crisp, unforgiving autumn. I sat in the witness stand, my hand resting on the undeniable curve of my stomach, a living shield against the venomous glares from the defense table. Vesperian looked like a ghost of the man I once knew. He sat in his charcoal suit, his skin sallow, the arrogance replaced by a frantic, twitching desperation. Beside him, Obsidiana sat in her own corner of the gallery, guarded by bailiffs, her eyes still sharp and cold, like 2 chips of flint. Mrs. Vesperian, the defense attorney began, pacing like a vulture. You claim my client embezzled funds, yet you were the one with access to the joint accounts. You were the one who bought a property lien behind his back. Isn't it true that you orchestrated this entire scandal out of spite because you discovered his infidelity? I looked at the jury, 12 citizens of Savannah who had watched the architect's fall on every news cycle. I didn't let my voice tremble. I orchestrated nothing but the truth, I said, my voice projecting to the back of the room. I didn't force Vesperian to use $320,000 of our savings to buy a condo for his mistress. I didn't force his mother to forge my signature to steal a $450,000 inheritance. And I certainly didn't force my husband to bypass safety regulations on the stadium expansion, risking the lives of thousands of families for a bigger profit margin. Objection! Speculation! The lawyer barked. It's not speculation, I countered, pulling the black ledger from my briefcase, the one the judge had finally admitted as evidence. It's mathematics. Page 142. A payment of $15,000 to a city inspector to look the other way on the structural steel. My husband didn't just build buildings. He built traps. A murmur rippled through the gallery. I saw the chairman of the waterfront project sitting in the front row go pale. And as for spite, I continued, leaning forward, my eyes locking onto Vesperian's. I didn't spend 13 years of my life with a man I hated. I spent 13 years with a man I thought existed. When I found out he was a shadow, I didn't act out of spite. I acted out of survival. I acted for the child who will never have to be ashamed of his last name because his mother had the courage to change it. The prosecutor stood up, presenting the final piece of the puzzle, the recorded confession of Vance Sterling. The room went deathly silent as the hitman's wheezing voice filled the chamber, detailing the final solution and the $50,000 price tag on my head. I watched Vesperian's lead counsel whisper frantically in his ear. Vesperian just stared at the floor, his hands shaking. He knew. He knew that the $700,000 in crypto I'd seized, the ledgers I'd uncovered, and the physical evidence of his assault at the house had created a cage no lawyer could open. The prosecution rests, Zenobia said, giving me a subtle, triumphant nod from the table. As I stepped down from the stand, I had to pass the defense table. Vesperian looked up, his face twisted in a mask of pathetic regret. Ixoi, I did it for us, for the future, he whispered, his voice cracking. I didn't stop. I didn't even slow down. You did it for yourself, Vesperian. And in the process, you became the very thing you used to mock, a failure. I walked out of the courtroom doors and into the hallway, where the light was bright and the air was clean. The verdict wouldn't come for another few hours, but as I felt a strong, healthy kick against my ribs, I knew I had already won. The ink on the court order was still wet, a dark blue contrast to the stark white paper that officially dismantled the Vesperian Empire. I sat in Zenovia's office, the high-back leather chair supporting the ache in my lower back. Outside the window, the savannah skyline was bathed in a bruised purple twilight. It's official, Zenovia said, sliding a final ledger across the desk. The judge didn't just rule in our favor. He made an example of them. Vesperian has been sentenced to 15 years for fraud, embezzlement, and attempted conspiracy. Obsidiana got 8 for her role in the forgery and money laundering. I looked at the numbers on the page. They were no longer just digits. They were the price of my freedom. And the assets? Everything, Zenovia replied with a sharp, satisfied grin. Because of the Slayer statute and the evidence of the hit they put on you, the court has diverted the entirety of the frozen assets to you as a victim settlement. You are now the sole owner of the Moss Haven estate. The $700,000 in recovered crypto and the $320,000 proceeds from the sale of the Midtown condo. After the creditors are paid off for Vesperian's debts, you're looking at a net liquid total of roughly $1.2 million. I let out a long, shuddering breath. I had started this with $92,000 and a prayer. Now, I held the keys to the kingdom they had tried to bury me under. There's more, Zenovia continued, her voice softening. The city council has revoked all of Vesperian's building permits. They're hiring a new firm to retrofit the stadium and the waterfront project. They've asked you, as a historian and the person who uncovered the structural flaws, to consult on the preservation aspect of the rebuild. It's a $150,000 contract. Ironic, I whispered. I'm being paid to fix the very traps he set. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. One of Zenovia's assistants walked in, looking hesitant. Mrs. Vesperian, Mrs. Silona, there's someone here to see you. She says it's urgent. I nodded. And a moment later, Nyx stepped into the room. She looked hollowed out. Gone was the expensive perfume and the arrogant tilt of her head. She was dressed in a simple, cheap coat, her hands trembling as she clutched a small envelope. I'm leaving Savannah, Nyx said, her voice barely a whisper. I wanted to give you this. It was in the condo. Vesperian told me it was a gift, but I found out it was actually yours. She placed the envelope on the desk. I opened it. Inside was my grandmother's vintage emerald necklace, a piece I thought I'd lost years ago. Vesperian had told me it was stolen during a burglary. In reality, he'd given it to his mistress as a trophy. Why give it back now? I asked, my voice cold. Because I watched the trial, Nyx said, a tear finally escaping. I realized that if he could try to kill the mother of his child, he would have eventually done the same to me. I was just a placeholder. I'm sorry, Zilona, for everything. She turned and left before I could respond. I picked up the necklace, the cold stones biting into my palm. It was a piece of my past, reclaimed from the wreckage. What will you do with the money, Zai? Zenobia asked, watching me. I'm going to start a foundation,
Ở Pháp
I
á?
said, looking out at the city.
Ba.
For women who are trapped in the same golden cages I was. And I'm going to change the name of the estate. Moss Haven is dead. From now on, it's just the sanctuary. I stood up, feeling a powerful, insistent kick from within. My son, or daughter, would be born into a world of truth, funded by the very lies that had tried to destroy us. The architect was in a cage of steel. I was in a fortress of my own making. The savannah sun was no longer a suffocating light. It was a warm, golden benediction. I stood on the sprawling porch of the estate, now officially renamed the Sanctuary, watching the painters scrape away the last traces of the Vesperian crest from the wrought iron gates. The air, once thick with the bitter tang of ammonia and the stale scent of old secrets, was now filled with the fragrance of blooming white lilies and the salt-tinged breeze from the Atlantic. It had been 3 months since the final gavel fell. Vesperian was serving his 15-year sentence in a maximum security facility in Atlanta, stripped of his licenses and his ego. Obsidiana was rotting in a federal wing for white-collar criminals, her influence reduced to the size of a concrete cell. Their world was now measured in iron bars, while mine had expanded to include the entire horizon. The gala starts in an hour, Zilona, Zenobia said, stepping out to join me. She looked radiant in a sharp-tailored suit, holding 2 glasses of sparkling cider. The board for the Zilona Foundation is already arriving. Every woman we've helped relocate this month is in that ballroom, breathing air that finally belongs to them. I looked down at the bundle in my arms. Zephyr, my son, named for the west wind that brings change, was fast asleep, his tiny fist curled against my chest. He had been born 2 weeks ago, healthy and loud, a vibrant life that had emerged from the wreckage of a war fought for his very existence. He has your eyes, Zenobia whispered, her gaze softening as she looked at the baby. And his father's chin, unfortunately. He has his own path, I corrected her firmly. I've already finalized the trust. $500,000 of the settlement is locked until he's 25. But more importantly, I've archived every court transcript, every ledger, and every recording of the final solution. When he's old enough to ask about the man who contributed half his DNA, he won't get a sanitized fairy tale. He'll get the cold, hard truth. He'll know his mother wasn't a victim. She was the architect of her own salvation. I walked back into the grand foyer. The transformation was startling. The heavy, dark mahogany furniture and oppressive portraits were gone, replaced by light-filled galleries and local art. We had turned the entire upper wing into a temporary shelter and resource center for women in crisis. Funded by the $150,000 consulting fee the city had paid me to oversee the truth build of the waterfront project. As I entered the ballroom, the room went silent for a heartbeat before erupting into a wave of applause. These weren't just guests. They were survivors, lawyers, and citizens who had seen the rot and chosen to help me cut it out. I didn't build this house, I said, my voice steady and projecting with a power that no longer needed to scream to be heard. I just cleared the debris. For 13 years, I lived in a structure built on lies, stolen blueprints, and the arrogance of men who thought I was part of the furniture. Today, we celebrate the fact that a foundation built on truth is the only thing that can truly withstand the storm. I looked toward the back of the room and saw a familiar face. Nix was there, working as one of the event coordinators. I I had hired her, not out of a sudden burst of sisterly love, but because I believed in the same second chances I had fought for. She was finally earning her own way. Her name no longer tied to a $320,000 condo that was never hers. She caught my eye and gave a small, respectful nod, a silent acknowledgement of the woman who had spared her. As the music began, a triumphant, soaring cello piece, I walked out onto the rear lawn toward the river. The Spanish moss swayed in the breeze, no longer looking like skeletons, but like lace. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a final notification from the DA. All appeals for Vesperian and Obsidiana officially exhausted. Case closed. I didn't even open the link. I took the phone and dropped it into a decorative stone urn, leaving the digital ghost behind. I adjusted Zephyr's blanket and looked out at the Savannah River. Vesperian had tried to design my ending. He forgot that a historian knows how to rewrite the past to secure the future. The story of the Vesperians was a footnote. The era of Xylona had just begun. Look, people might betray you, but never let them break your spirit. The best revenge is staying calm, keeping your independence and protecting your own future. Stand tall and build a life so good that their betrayal becomes nothing more than a tiny footnote in your success. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and drop a comment below to let me know your thoughts. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on the next intense and empowering stories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.